Okay.
Okay. So, welcome to the Happy Panda Podcast, Episode 1. Uh, I'm Artur Sura, and we have online Alex. Hi,
Hello.
Alex.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Not too bad. Here in spring-like Helsinki.
Okay. I'm in always delightful Moscow.
Moscow.
So, the reason why we're holding this podcast is to talk about typical issues which Westerners face when doing business in China. And our expertise or lack of, in my case, is twofold. So I'm entering the China business in a role of working professional.
Okay, so you get paid for it.
I get paid for it. And Alex, what's your brief background
Okay, I've been working in China for the last 20 years. I studied Chinese and the study of modern China in university in Australia, and since graduation I've been working in different industries, in different roles, in different parts of China. So basically, I started with a very personal interest in China, and it's led to me being able to have an income all this time. Now I've moved to Helsinki and I'm doing some consulting for companies who are starting their business in China.
Right. So it's safe to say that you know practically everything there is to know about.
Well, you have to be careful there because China is such a big place that if you know, you probably don't know what you don't know. But if you can speak Chinese and you can handle yourself by yourself without needing for other people, Chinese people to help you, then basically you're fairly independent, and that's what I can do, and that's what I do. So I always am a little bit hesitant, when I hear people say how well they know China, because the fact is it's such a big place and each city is so different. But there are a few road rules that will get you through, and I can perhaps walk through those road rules through this podcast.
Right. I think as it being a first episode, I think a fun and exciting topic to touch upon would be something that I may have to do in the near future, which is attending a banquet or a dinner, which is in many ways daunting. So what are your thoughts on that? What are they like? What should I be thinking about, and what are the scenarios where I could be?
Well, there's a few different dinners, different types of dinners. They all involve drinking a lot. So probably, if you have some.
It's a good thing I'm in Moscow right now, so I can prepare myself for.
Yes, you should. But the way they drink in China is quite different. It's they drink very early. They drink hard and then they go home, or they fall over very early. So there are a few different types of situations that you can see yourself in for having a dinner or having a banquet. Basically, I use those two words, but it means the same thing. And one of those that's very common for foreign companies when they're just entering China is that they will have opportunities to meet the local government officials or perhaps their joint venture partner. And this type of dinner is very important because in China, people really want to feel that they have a personal relationship with the people that they work with. And it's often this relationships are made over dinner. There's also, as I said before, there's a real alcohol culture. It depends where you are, but in general, the bigger cities, people are drinking less. They're also drinking, they'll be more likely to drink red wine or beer. But if you leave the big cities, and especially if you are in, for example, the agricultural industry or the oil and gas industry, then you'll be drinking a lot of Chinese Baijiu, which is basically Chinese vodka, the percentage is anywhere from 40 to 70%. So let's say that you're having a dinner with a government official, and in China you really need the support of government officials for your project. So imagine you're building a factory, or you need permits for selling something, or whatever situation it is where you need the support of the government official. A banquet is a very good opportunity to get the relationship going, and even maybe if there's a suitable time in the night, just to ask him directly to ask him directly to support whatever problem you're particularly having. So when the thing about Chinese dinners is that they start quite early. So a Chinese dinner would normally be 6 o'clock, 6:30, food on the table, people eating. They tend to start very formally. The first thing is when you're having a Chinese banquet is don't sit down first. There's normally a round table. Before everybody is there, you'll be sitting on a side table, drinking tea, having a chat. And then when everybody is there, especially the main people, or basically when everybody who's coming to the dinner is in the room, then the host will walk towards the round table, and that's when he will assign everyone their seats. So the host will always sit with his back to the corner away from the door, and then on his left-hand side he will ask the number one guest to sit there. So this is also a good time where you can see in their company or in the government people who is the most senior people, because it is, when it comes to setting the sitting places, it'll be the number one guy who makes that arrangement, or the number one guy will be put in the number one seat, and then his number two will arrange the seat. So let's say Arthur, that you are the number one guest, so you'll be asked to sit on the left side of the host. And the reason why you're sitting on the left side is that he can very easily, with his chopsticks, put food in your bowl. So if you're sitting on the right, it's not so easy. So the sitting on the left of the host, of the most senior person, is the highest place on the table. And normally what you should do, for example, if you are the boss, you should be sitting there. If you have a translator, if you need one, then you can put him on the right side of the host, and then it's very easy for you to communicate. So normally the host will then assign all the seats, and it goes from his left-hand side is the number one, and then his right-hand side is either the interpreter or the number two guest, and then it will go left, right, and then the lowest person on the table, or often the driver, will be sitting with his back to the door. And the main reason for that is that it's very easy for him to go out and call the waitress or go and pay. So in China, the one who sits closest to the door is the one that will normally go and pay. They're also the one that will facilitate, a lot of the ordering and things like that. Then the second point is, once everybody is seated.
Hold on. Like let me picture a situation. So does the host yell out all the people by the name and kind of with his finger like a point? Hey, you, Mr. John, you go sit
here
over there.
You sit here.
He'll
tell everybody.
Situation.
Exactly, and then sometimes people, if they're a bit embarrassed, for example, if your boss is there, and the host asks you to sit on his left-hand space, you will know, that's not for me, that's for the boss. And you say, no, my boss, he will sit here. And then maybe the host isn't clear about your company, who is the big boss, the ranking there. So that's also very important, that that you should make sure that your ranking of your company is also recognized and put into the seating arrangements properly.
And what if there are several companies which you would say that are almost of equal standing in that relation, in that situation?
Yeah, then normally if one is a bigger company, then he would. It depends on the business with the business relationship with the government officials. If there is, for example, a big company and a little company, then the big company would go in the number one position.
And is the table always physically round, or is it like?
Yes, it's 99%. It's always a round table, and the reason why is that in Chinese food is always shared. So you have a lazy Susan, and the food is circling around. And sometimes those lazy Susans in very famous, very big places are actually automatic, so that they move by themselves. So that you grab the food as it goes past you.
What is a lazy? What is that?
Lazy Susan, you know when you're sitting at the table in a Chinese restaurant, and there is a circular glass disc, a small table on top of the table in front of you.
Yeah, it rotates.
A rotate, yeah. We call it in English. We call it a lazy Susan.
Okay.
So you'll have a lazy Susan lying on the table in front of you.
But this is still early, so it's.
Yeah. It comes to another.
Nobody has passed out yet. Who is?
Not yet. So everybody is seated.
Yeah.
And then what happens in a Chinese restaurant or in a Chinese banquet, that the host or someone from the host side will order all the food. There's no discussion about what food is going to be ordered. And quite often when the guests are coming to the room, some of the dishes are already on the table. The cold dishes, the starters, they're already on the table. But they might ask, is there any food that you don't eat? In some areas, like in Sichuan, they might ask you if you can eat chili, and if you can't eat spicy, then they will order some dishes that are not spicy for you. But in places that eat a lot of spice, there will always be a lot of spicy dishes. But they also will make an effort if they know that you can't eat spice, that they will order some dishes that are either not spicy or not so spicy.
And so the food basically rotates on this lazy Susan. Right?
That's right, exactly.
Do I need to taste every food?
Sometimes what will happen is that they have a specialty of the area, and if the host makes a special remark about the food, he might. And normally, what will happen is if there is a particular dish that he is very proud of, because maybe it's a local dish, he will give you a little bit of that dish. He will give you a little bit in your bowl for you to try. So normally if they have a particular dish they're very proud of, they'll introduce and say, these noodles are a specialty from this area. And of course they would like it, that you try. But if you don't like it, then don't say anything negative, but try also not to show that you don't like it. But definitely, if you like it, you should say.
And also, how many people can be around the table?
Well, if you have a big table, you can have 13 or 14 people. But on the average, I would say 10 people is the norm.
Mm-hmm. And all 10 people basically pick the food out of these lazy Susan bowls with their own chopsticks.
Yes, this is another thing. In some places, you will see that they have chopsticks next to the dishes on the lazy Susan. And if they have chopsticks like that, then they're expecting you to use those communal chopsticks to take the food. But in my experience, it is very, very unusual to have that. And normally you just take the food with your own chopsticks. It's considered not so polite if you eat directly from the dish on the lazy Susan. You should put some food on your own bowl first. But there's in 99% of cases, people are using their own chopsticks to take the food.
So in the West, like interaction with other person's saliva is not super desirable unless you're really intimate with that person.
Yeah, in China, it's really not an issue at all. Sometimes you can ask, can we have this communal chopsticks, and they will bring them out. Sometimes, like I said, they have them but in most cases you take the food from the single plates yourself.
Yeah. So basically, if you're an American and double dipping is for you like the biggest no-no, you have some mental coaching to be done.
Yes.
In order
yes.
to be, like not a nervous wreck in this situation.
Exactly. But I mean, I've maybe I'm just so used to it now that I don't even think about it. But I think that most foreigners who are living in China or go to China often don't consider this to be a big issue anymore.
Yeah.
So once they get used to it.
I remember being yelled at in the United States when by accident I was just arrived. I arrived like 2 months prior, and I double dipped my chicken wing in the dip sauce. And that was like record stop, and everyone was like, "What are you doing? Are you insane?"
Yeah, in China, it's absolutely not an issue. So anyway, the dinner is at the stage where everybody's sitting down, the dishes are starting to come, and then the host will ask the number one guest, "What would you like to drink tonight?" And the choices, when they ask like that, they're talking about alcohol, and depending on the situation, if you are trying to, carry some favor with the host, or if it's, sales situation or any situation where you want to make sure that the host is happy, you just always say, whatever you want to drink, we'll drink. And then they'll say, most likely they'll say Baijiu. And then that's what you're drinking. Sometimes what happens is that they will give you options. Do you want beer or wine or baijiu? And then on the table, some people will be drinking beer, some people will be drinking wine, some people will be drinking baijiu. That also happens, but it's more likely that everybody will be drinking the same alcohol.
And this baijiu is rice based.
It's grain based. There are many different ones. There are some made of rice. There are some made of grain. There are some that are double distilled, which are very, very strong. Most Westerners, I would say, do not appreciate baijiu, and that for them it's a real chore to drink it. But in fact, baijiu is a very expensive drink, and for the Chinese, they really enjoy it. So also because the alcohol content is quite high, it's also a drink that you get drunk on very quickly. And one of the aims of a banquet is sort of to see how the other side is thinking and what sort of person they are. And so for the Chinese, they want to try and get you drunk, and once you're drunk, then they think that the real you will come out, and that's the person that they want to see.
Okay. And how would you describe the taste of this baijiu? Like, for example, comparing to vodka?
Vodka is almost no taste. Baijiu has a very strong taste. It's more like grain. I would say it's a little bit more like tequila than anything.
Okay.
So normally it's served room temperature. It's never chilled. But if it's winter, then probably if it's been sitting outside, it's quite cold. And if it's cold, it's much easier to swallow. If it's, I had some in Henan province once, and it had been sitting in the guy's car, and it was hot. It was like like tea, and to drink baijiu like that was difficult. That was really difficult.
And is it served in a shot glass?
Yes, it's there are two general ways that they will serve it to you. One is that you have your own little glass, and that once that is drunk, then the person with the bottle will come and fill it up from the big bottle. The other way is that every person will have a small carafe, and that carafe can maybe take 20 or maybe 40 or 50 mils. Maybe about 50 mils of baijiu, and then they make sure that everybody gets the same amount, and then that's another way for them to monitor how much you're drinking, because they can look at the carafe and see how much is left compared to the other people.
So it's a
and
see-through
yeah,
carafe.
it's a small glass. Yes, exactly, glass carafe. And then so normally the waitresses will go around and they will ask you, do you want baijiu or do you want beer or whatever? Because normally it will be decided, by the host and the guest. Okay, we'll all have baijiu, but sometimes some people will have beer, some people will have wine, and then the waitresses will go around and they will give you what the thing that you want. But normally with baijiu, they will fill the carafe, they will fill your glass, and then when everybody has alcohol to drink, whether it's beer or wine or baijiu, then the first host or the first cheers is the first toast is normally drunk standing up. And so the other thing is that if somebody drinks with you and they stand up, especially if they're more senior than you should always stand up to drink the host back with them. You should never, like if sometimes if a person who is of lower status than you stands to drink with you, you can have then the right to say, please sit down, let's drink sitting down. But if the person is more senior than you, when they stand up, you also have to stand up and drink. So the host will stand up and everybody will stand up and he will say some words, and he will say, thank you, for example, thank you for everyone for coming. It's very nice that you're here. And then you have the first drink. And then the first toast is always to the bottom. Ganbei, dry the glass. So you finish the glass. So you finish the alcohol in the glass. Then quite often people will still be standing, and then the host will introduce all the people from his side. And in Chinese, they will normally say the surname and position. So, for example, if you're a manager or like CEO or a chairman, you'll say, Chairman Liu, and he'll give an introduction to all his people. And there are two very important things to note and listen carefully when he does that. One is when you are toasting later in the night, you want to be able to remember people's names, because it will be very noisy in the banquet, and you're normally shouting across the table, and it's a mark of respect if you can remember the people's names, if you know people's names. So if you want to drink, with the engineer, Mr. Liu, you say, Engineer Liu, let's drink. And then when he hears his name, he'll be very happy that you know his name, and then he'll drink back with you. But the other important thing is that the host will tell you what all his people are doing. So, for example, if you need government approvals, he might say, this guy here, Mr. Lee, he's the one that does the government approval work for you. And so then that's an unofficial way for the host to be telling you that for all the little things, you don't need to bother him, but you can talk to Mr. Lee. So this is a very important, opportunity for you to listen and find out, exactly who's responsible for what and who will help you with what problem. Then after everybody on their side has been introduced, then the host, maybe he'll know everyone on your table, maybe not. And if not, then he'll ask you to introduce all the people. And then you do the same. You say their names, say what they do, and then on the host side, they will also know who the people on your company will be the ones that they're dealing with later in the business.
You mentioned that if a person who is lower rank from the other company, that, for example, me, if he stands up, I don't have to stand up.
No, but you have to say, please sit down.
But I should say, but if I don't say that, then that's a big sign of disrespect.
Yes, that's been rude. That's
yes.
been rude.
Yes. Okay.
And if the guy is more senior and he stands to propose the toast to you, you must stand to return the host. Otherwise, to return the toast. Otherwise, you'd be seen as being very rude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then the other thing. So if someone more senior than you proposes a toast, or you propose a toast with him, when you go to clink your glasses together, the height of your glass must be lower than the guy who is higher than you.
Okay.
And it's considered very rude. So, for example, if you're the number one guy and the driver of the government office is drinking with you, he would always have his glass much lower than yours, maybe even, like you can imagine the small shot glasses. Some of them have a little stem. Maybe he will even, with his top part of the glass, he will touch the bottom part of your glass to show the difference in status. That's very important. So sometimes what happens is, if you're drinking with someone of the same level, they will always try, out of politeness, to put their glass lower than yours. But if you acknowledge that, it's sort of, especially if they're a customer, you always want to make them feel good. So what one way to do it is, if the guy is at the same level of you, or if you want him to feel that he's at the same level as you, when you're going to drink, when you're going to touch glasses, quite often you're going over the table. And so you put your glass on the top of the table, and then there's no way for him to be underneath you.
So you're holding the glass, but you put it on the table.
You put it on the table, and then you push it towards him, and then he will do the same, but the glasses are at the same level.
Okay.
So this is one little trick, that you see people.
So you're basically equal then, right? He doesn't keep his glass a little bit higher.
Well, if he wants to do that, that's also good, because sometimes in some situations, especially with customers, you want them to feel happy. So if you are of a similar level, and it could easily be that you're a little bit senior to him, but if you do that, it's a big sign of respect that you're showing to him. And basically, these dinners, especially if they're with customers or with government officials, you want them feeling that you respect them and that you acknowledge their position. So these are all little signs for doing that. So anyway, the host has introduced everyone, so everybody knows each other. Then what will happen is there will be pairings of drinks. So the host will then propose a toast to the number one guest. And at the same time, people who are of second and third levels, they will start proposing toast with their people of the same level of the other party. So then there'll be a lot of drinks will be going around, normally like one or two drinks for each person, and then everyone will sit down, and then they'll start to eat. And after they eat a little bit, then maybe the host will make a toast, or the number one guest will make a toast. And sort of towards the end of the night, or maybe sort of halfway through the banquet, some people will start to come up and they will drink a circle with everyone on the table. Sometimes they'll do it from their seat. Otherwise, they will take their carafe Baijiu and they will walk around and they will drink with everyone in the table in one circle. And in some companies, they'll expect the junior people to do that. So sometimes in China, if you're a junior employee, it's really quite tough because they expect you to be drinking a lot.
So, hold on. They take a shot with every single guest, or they take
Yes.
one shot like at the same time with all the guests?
No, one by one.
One by one. So it could be like
one by one.
10 shots in a row.
Yes, could be.
And then they die. And then they bring the next junior account.
straight to hospital. And then if you're the senior person, the host, then you can always say, they just say as you like. There are two ways to drink. One is when you finish the drink, and the second one they say as you like. 随便. 随便 is 随 is just means that as you like. So like for example, if you're the most senior person in the table and someone comes to drink with you, then you can say, I will have a sip and you finish the glass. And they have to do that. And quite often when you come to a more senior person, you will say, I will fish and you just have a sip. And that's also a sign of respect.
Okay. So I volunteer to be more hammered than you are.
Exactly. And sometimes, the older guys are not, the more senior guys are not so, maybe they've been drinking too much in their life and they're not able to drink too much. And quite often what will happen is that one of their assistants or someone in their company will be their drinking proxy. And they will stand up and say, Mr. Lee, the boss, he can't drink very much today, he's not well, so I will drink for him. And so then you go around and you drink a circle with everyone.
How is it viewed as equal, or is it like from respect point of view, or
well,
is it weird? Like, is it common?
In that way, it's of course it's not the same as the boss drinking with you. But it's also, sometimes the boss will say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on medication, I can't drink, but today this guy will drink for me." So in that, if he says it like that, then it's at the same level, almost at the same level.
And is the guy like a driver?
No, that's the other thing in China is that up until about 5 years ago, people would drink and drive quite commonly. But 5 years ago, they became very strict, and overnight, people just didn't dare to drink and drive. So it's sort of another little example about how quickly China will change or can change. Because I remember in the past, quite often, the drivers would be drunk. But then after they had one national movement where they started really checking for drink driving, and after that time, people just stopped drink driving 100%. So So in the past, the driver was probably drinking the best, but now if he's driving, then he won't be drinking.
Okay.
So one actually point, a safety point that I would like to mention here is when you're eating fish in China, you need to be very careful because they leave the bones in fish. And normally, when you cook fish Western style, most of the bones have been removed. And if there are some bones left, they're normally bigger bones that you can see easily and remove them with a knife and fork. But in China, there are a lot of bones there. And there are quite a lot of stories of people at banquets swallowing a piece of fish and then needing to be rushed to the hospital to get the fish bone taken out of their throat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I've heard a few times, and it's just something to be a little bit careful of.
So, what kind of fish is served? Is it like a small
They
fish?
have every type of fish. The Chinese food is very, very rare, very, very varied. So it can be any type of fish, but quite often it's freshwater fish, and so the bones are quite small. And a very common way of serving fish in China is that the whole fish, the guts are taken out, but then the whole fish is steamed, and nothing else is done to it after it's been steamed, and then they put it, on the lazy Susan, and then you take the meat, and obviously the bones are still there.
What are the common foods, and what are the weird foods which Westerners could be scared of?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in China, it's the different areas have very, very different foods. One food that I personally don't like myself very much is turtle, like especially the turtle shell. I find that quite difficult to eat, and in Chinese cooking, it's seen as a little bit of a high class food, and so sometimes you'll have a whole turtle. And once you've to have one of those is maybe okay, but if the second time or third time you're eating it, sometimes you feel, that's a little bit too much.
I have never eaten or heard anybody eating a turtle. So
yeah, if you
how
go
is
to
it
some
served,
parts,
and what are the edible parts?
Well, the way that I've seen it is it's often served in soup, and so then it's cut up and it's in soup. But they also have the shell there.
Actually, I have seen that once, and I almost lost my mind when I saw a whole floating turtle in a big bowl of soup.
Yeah, and then sometimes everybody will have their own turtle on their plate, and the whole turtle is cooked, and you eat everything, the shell, the body,
But isn't shell
everything.
really like hard and?
But there must be some type that is soft, because and especially once it's cooked, you can eat the shell as well. I've had that in Anhui province, and you eat the whole thing.
And what's the texture of the shell when it's like cooked? Is it soft or crunchy or?
It's not crunchy. It's soft, but it's quite chewy. I think one thing that a lot of Westerners find quite difficult or new is that there is in China there's a type of food that is quite popular, or the type of cooking, and it's thicker than water, but thinner than, for example, jelly. And it's
like slime.
It's basically like slime, yeah. And that's quite a challenge for people to get used to.
Yes, I know that, and I think
so.
I've overcome my fear towards
like
that.
Sea cucumber is a little bit like that.
Yeah.
I remember once a friend of mine was saying that they were having a dinner with someone that they were not sure if he was unhappy with them or whatever, and he ordered a soup, and then they said, "Oh, what soup is this?" And he said, "Oh, please eat the soup first, and then I'll tell you." And after they'd eaten the soup, it was pig penis soup.
Thanks for this.
Yeah,
it tastes horrible the whole way of eating it.
And then I have another story about a friend of mine from Denmark, and he was in the agricultural business, and he was somewhere in the south of China, and he was sitting at one of these banquets, and he was the only one that couldn't speak Chinese, so he was sort of on his own a little bit. And they had ordered puffer fish, that poisonous fish that they often have in Japanese food. So the puffer fish came to the table along, with a few other dishes, but everybody was on their phone. Everybody was really busy, and so my friend was no one to talk to, and he was a little bit hungry. So after a few minutes, he picked his chopsticks up and he took a bit of the puffer fish, and he put it in his mouth, and then he swallowed. And once he swallowed, everybody on the table put their phones down, and they said, "He's okay. Let's eat."
Really? So it was like a test.
And then he realized, that he was the guinea pig.
Oh, wow. So do Chinese like this type of practical jokes?
But that wasn't a practical joke.
It was not?
That's not a practical joke.
Is
a
it
lot of people die from those puffer fish.
Yes, I know. But I was just thinking maybe this was checked and cooked properly before it was served, but it's not. Is it like 50-50? You die or you don't die?
I've heard even Japanese food, in Japan, that they also have a certain percentage of people who die to eat it. So he was the test guinea pig, and after he took a piece and he was okay, they then all tucked in. So maybe just talk a little bit about this drinking culture.
Yeah.
Some, of course, if you can, to drink, with the customers or with the government officials is always good. You don't have to drink as much as they want you to drink. If you don't want to drink at all, then you should just say at the start, "No, I can't drink Baijiu. I can't drink it, health reasons." You can make up an excuse, or you just say that you won't drink. But if you accept one glass, then there will be a lot more glasses following you. So if you don't want to drink Baijiu, or if you don't want to drink alcohol, you should just stick to your guns from the start and say, I'll only have tea. But if you're in a sales situation where you're trying to sell, then it's definitely for establishing a good rapport with your customer. Having a few drinks with him is a very good thing.
Are there any tactics to drink but kind of more moderately? For example, in Russia, the trick is to not finish your glass, so then they won't fill up every shot.
You can try and do that as well, but the thing is that you have 10 people on the table and they're all looking at your glass, and so once you put the glass down, then then they say, "Hey, you didn't finish it." And if you say that you're going to finish it and don't finish it, then they'll be unhappy with you. So the other thing is that if you feel that you can't drink anymore, you just say, "I'm sorry, please give me 5 minutes," and then you just try and buy yourself some time, drink some tea, eat some food, try and put something else other than alcohol in your stomach.
What should you say when you're about to throw up and you have to excuse yourself to go to the bathroom?
Just go to the bathroom, because you won't be the only one.
There's a line.
Yeah, and normally if you're in a nicer restaurant, what you'll find, especially with government officials, they will not want to eat in the open part of the restaurant. They'll always eat in a VIP room, and the reason for that is that they don't want other people to see them out. Because nowadays in China, there's this really big anti-corruption push, and so to drink outside, or to eat and have fancy dinners outside, is frowned upon. So you'll normally go to a VIP room, and in your VIP room you'll have your own bathroom.
Oh, really? Okay.
But this a lot of the VIP rooms don't have their own bathroom, and then you go outside down the corridor. And this is actually another sort of trick that you have to remember, is that if you know you're going to be drinking a lot in that dinner, then before you get too drunk, just make a dry run to the toilet so that you know where it is, and also that you know how to get back to your room, because often the rooms will only have a Chinese name. If they have a number, it's easier. So when you leave, look for a number or look for some type of identifying sign that you can get yourself back, because sometimes there might be 20 or 30 VIP rooms, and if you're really drunk and you go to the toilet and you come back, sometimes it's really difficult to find your way back.
Yeah, especially if you don't speak Chinese.
Yeah, especially if you don't speak Chinese.
and
it's embarrassing if you walk into the wrong room. So.
And if you're drunk, you may not even notice.
Exactly.
All right, well, so where were we?
Yeah, exactly. Who the hell are you? So that's one bit of advice. If you know it's going to be a hard night, then go to the toilet earlier and find out where it is, so that if you need it in a rush, you can be there in a hurry. And also you can get back to your room. You know how to go to get back to your room. So the night will continue like this, with drinking and discussing, and then you might find that the mood of the dinner changes. And sometimes what happens is you're going to have a dinner with a government official or a customer because you have a certain issue, and after the most of the eating has been done and most of the drinking has also been done, then you might find that everybody becomes very serious and they start talking about a problem. And that's also, if you have a problem, that's also the time to raise it with your host. And so say, like, I didn't want to bother you, but, we're having problems to get approvals for this project. And, the bosses in headquarters are very worried, and I was just wondering, if you could give me some advice how to solve this problem. And if the guy is, depending what the problem is, but if the guy is in a good mood and the problem he's able to solve, then he will tell you, then you need to go and see Mr. Wang. Mr. Wang is the one who can get you that approval. And then you say, who should go and talk to him? And then he'll say, you don't go, you're the big boss. And then you can say, okay, I'll get my assistant. And you introduce the assistant to Mr. Wang. Tomorrow morning, they'll go and discuss with you exactly what documents need to be done. And then after that happens...
They will have shaking hands, and they will have a soda can, which they try to cure their hangover.
Exactly. And then you'll be very happy. Thank you. You've really solved my problem. Then you'll have a drink with everyone. So... That's how you show your happiness. But in general, in a banquet occasion, you don't want to bring anything that's going to really turn the mood very sour. So if you have a problem, you don't say, I'm really angry that, you guys haven't been able to do anything about this problem. You just say, I have this problem and I was wondering if you could help me. And then you structure it in such a way that the guy can give some advice and give some help without offending him. Because this basically the main reason for these banquets is to build a relationship. And if you go in too direct and negative, then the guy will feel that you don't have any respect for him, and he won't help you. In the past, I've also seen like this, that sometimes what happens is I used to work for a power station, and we needed the local government to buy more electricity from us. So we had a meeting with the local party secretary, and we said, we have this problem. The power department is not buying enough power from our power station. Can you please tell them to buy more power, just to follow the contracts? And the guy said, yes, I'm going to tell them. And then we had a joint venture, and the Chinese partner, he pulled out the contract, and he said, Mr. Party Secretary, can you please write? At this time, everybody was really drunk, including the Party Secretary. He said, can you please write on the contract that, the Power Bureau must follow the contract and sign it? And he did it. And so then, the next day we went to the Power Bureau and we said, look, Party Secretary signed this, so please follow the contract. And when they saw it, oh my God, he signed the contract. He made a personal note on the contract. Then they'll do it. And we had, like in some companies, if you have, for example, environmental issues, you can also get political support to say, give them 6 months to solve the problem. And then they write a note when they're drunk, they sign it, and then you show it to the environmental bureau. That's happening less, but in the past, that sort of thing was very common. So a business dinner can be a very useful tool for doing business in China.
Mm-hmm. What does the roles or the role of toasts play? Are they important?
It's a sign of respect, but unlike in Russia, you don't really say a speech when you make a toast.
Okay.
You just call out a guy's name and say drink, and that's the toast.
Oh, really?
It's very simple. Sometimes, if someone has helped you, you might say, thank you very much for the help that you've given me in such an issue. But that's definitely more rare.
Okay.
Normally a toast is just a sign of respect and to try and get alcohol down the other person's throat.
So it's more like a drinking game.
Yes, yeah. And sometimes what happens is that, especially if you're in a company dinner where you're not with customers or you're not with, you're not with government officials, sometimes people will gang up on you and try and get you drunk. And imagine most companies will have an annual dinner. And at the annual dinner, maybe you could have several hundred people in the room, all your company. And if you're a senior person in the company, like the general manager or a department manager, towards the end of the night, you'll start to see all these people coming up to your table with a glass in their hands and saying, production manager, thank you for helping me. I'm in your department. Let's have a drink. And so quite often you're really drinking very, very heavily then. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it's a bit of a game. People try and get you drunk.
Right. I can imagine.
So in company dinners in China, people are often getting very drunk.
And what are there differences between man and a woman?
Yes. Normally women are not drinking. But some women will drink, and some women drink very well. So if at the start of the night a woman says, no, I'll just have tea, nobody will push her unless they know she can drink. And then they say, no, you don't have tea, you have baijiu. But if a man says, I want to have tea, he'll have to have a little bit of an excuse. I'm sick, or I'm on medicine, or something like that. It's for a woman though. She can normally just say, "I just drink tea," and then or juice or whatever, and then it's okay. But quite often, For example, I was at a dinner recently, and it was with the local government who's in charge, the government department that's in charge of getting investment into that area. And a few of the officers in that department were ladies, and they were all expected to drink. And they all came up and drank with us one by one. So it doesn't. It's not always a get out of jail card, but being a woman and not having to drink. Sometimes you also are expected to drink, but definitely not as much as men. And normally, if you don't want to, then you don't have to.
Are women seen as being on equal stature or position as men?
It depends. It depends on their role. In that case, China is very fair. If you have a woman who is more senior than you in the government, then she is absolutely more senior than you, and she is more you have to give her respect. But in general, the senior positions in the government are almost always held by men. But sometimes there are some women, but on the whole, 98% it's going to be a man. But if it is a woman, then she gets the respect that is owed to her for her position, regardless of whether she's a man or a woman.
So basically, like coming from the West, if you're a woman, you really don't need to take any extra measures, and you can easily say that I'm not drinking, just tea, please, and that's basically it.
Yes, that would be no problem. That would be no problem, unless that they know that you do drink, and then they'll say, but last week you drank Baijiu, so this week you can drink Baijiu as well. So you have to remember that the people will remember what you've been drinking.
Okay. What are there any differences between if you're at the government hosted party or banquet versus business?
The one difference at the moment is that because of the anti-corruption purge going on at the moment, that government officials are very worried about showing off, and so a government dinner will normally be much more low-key and have less fancy food nowadays than if you go to than if you're being hosted by a private company. That's one thing. In the past, the local government, they could spend as much money as they wanted on food and alcohol, so you always had very fancy meals with the government officials. But now, if they are hosting, it's a lot more down key, a lot more low key. Actually, one thing I should say here is that one thing that you'll find that is quite common, especially for companies, if you're hosted by a company, is that when you've come into the room, you'll find that they will bring their own alcohol with them, especially wine or baijiu, not beer or things like that, but baijiu or wine. And often they will, the company for entertainment, they will buy a huge amount of baijiu, and they'll just they will take that when they're having official dinners. And the reason why is that baijiu is very expensive. So if you can buy it in bulk, it's much cheaper. You get a good quality product, not a fake product, and the price is not so high. So often you'll see people will bring their own baijiu or red wine into the restaurant with them. They wouldn't, of course, they wouldn't bring food or beer, but baijiu and wine, they will do that. That's very, very, very accepted.
So how much would like a good baijiu cost at the supermarket?
If even if you're having I think that if you are spending anything less than 200 renminbi, then it's really low class. And
for like for 1 liter.
Yeah, for 1 liter. And for quite a lot of the alcohols, there's several thousand. So
really?
Yeah, so one reason for people bringing their own baijiu is that if they buy them outside, they're much cheaper. But often, the bill for an official dinner can become quite high, and mostly it's the baijiu. Baijiu can be several thousand for one bottle.
Mm-hmm. And
And
why is it so expensive? But I mean, I've noticed in China that liquor is, in general, is expensive.
I think that the thing is that there are several brands in China that are very famous and very well known. And with those brands, you have to pay the money. So that's it's basically marketing that's put that price up. And then over the last years, since Xi Jinping has started to crack down on corruption, the cost of Baijiu, or the price of Baijiu, has really fallen because the government doesn't have the money to buy anymore. So because they were the biggest consumers of everything in China, if they're not buying, then the price has to fall to keep demand up.
I think also the demand for cognac and champagne declined at the same time.
Everything, flowers, everything went down.
So,
because
it was a global implications for all the luxury products.
Yes, of course, and but even like my old company, we were selling flowers, and for some of our customers, 80% of their customers were government. So when the government stopped buying, the impact on the economy was huge.
How about a topic which is kind of on a gray area, which is bribes?
Yeah.
You said that's very strong campaign against it going on. But let's say that you're doing business, and at this dinner, the party whom you're trying to smooch up to indicates that the best way to advance this deal is to give some bribe. What are the because and usually, I mean, at least in Russia, in these type of situations, the party does not say that give me money in an envelope, but they would give hints that that's what's required. So, and I mean, not taking into account whether you should give bribe or not, but to understand the other side a little bit better. Have you noticed what would be the common practices of indicating that some cash is needed to advance the business?
Yeah, normally what will happen is the number one guy of the government that you're dealing with, or the company that you're dealing with, he will have someone lower down in his company talk to someone lower down in your company. Maybe they're sales engineers or someone like that, and they have a lot of talking. They spend a lot of time talking about mainstream business, and then the message will be going in a very so highly confidential way through those two people, and then your guy will come to you and say, that Mr. Wang, he wants some money to help him. He wants about this much money, and he'll probably also tell you how to give him the money. And then you make the decision. But yeah, in this big banquets, it's very, very unlikely that because people are super sensitive to it at the moment, so they wouldn't raise it, when there's many people about, because it's too dangerous for them. If someone reports a government official, who's asking for a bribe, that could very easily mean the end of his career and jail time.
Mm-hmm. Or death, right? There's death penalty.
It depends how much bribes. But normally what's happening in China now is that officials are going through they call it shrangwei. It's like it's a type of court proceeding, not in the court. It's a government sort of a private court system, and they take you away and they hold you incommunicado and basically try and break you down and find out all the information, and then they will decide what to do with you. So normally, unless it's very, very serious, they won't give you the death sentence. But definitely, you'll lose your job, you'll lose your party membership, and yeah, basically, your life is over.
Yeah. So should be really a big bribe in order to take that chance.
Yeah, and on the other hand, because the situation is like this at the moment, that everybody's so worried about it, that it's also a sign of confidence if somebody will ask you for a bribe, because the risks of getting a bribe or even asking for a bribe are quite high. So if the person has the confidence to ask you for a bribe, then it's also a sign that he has a strong confidence in your relationship. So that's already quite a good situation.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe let's wrap up this dinner. So the other thing about a Chinese dinner is that it starts early, the drinking is hard, and then it finishes quite early. So sometimes, or normally, what will happen is the host, maybe he has another function that he has to go to, or 8 o'clock is quite a common time. He will stand up and say, let's have one more drink and then goodbye. And then and so sometimes like you're talking with the host, and he'll say, I think that's enough. He'll just say something like that. I think that's enough. Oh, okay. And then let's have, and then you'll say, let's have one more drink, and then everybody will leave. So in that way, you see that the dinner it's not so sort of free as you thought. It's not so spontaneous as you thought. People are going through the rhythms.
Okay.
Those government officials, they'll be having official dinners most likely every night. If it's coming up to some important meetings, maybe they'll be having 2 official dinners each night. So they'll start one at 6, and then maybe at 7 or 7:30 they'll excuse themselves and say, I'm sorry, I have another function. And then his people will stay at the table and drink with you, but he will go to another dinner.
Wow, that's a tough job.
Yeah, so it's quite often it's really quite it's quite hard for them. But the last couple of years they've really reeled it back quite a lot.
Yeah. So then it's like 8 o'clock. Dinner is wrapping up. And
dinner is finished. Yeah, 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
You then normally what happens is you'll have your final drink. Everybody will walk out together. The host maybe he'll take you to the car, or he'll get his car to take you back if you don't have your own car. And then the night is over.
Okay. And there's no like after functions.
It depends what type of situation. Like, for example, if you are trying to wine and dine a customer, after the dinner, you might say, why don't we go to karaoke or something like that, and then the night will continue on. But for one of these more formal business dinners with a larger company or a more senior company, or with the government officials, normally at the end of the dinner, the night is over and everyone goes home. But it really depends. Sometimes they will say to you, how about we go to karaoke or go to a bar. Normally it's karaoke, but they will. If that happens, then it's going to be a long one.
I think the topic of karaoke could be a good topic for a different podcast.
Yes, yeah, let's maybe wait until all the kids are asleep.
Maybe, yeah. R-rated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good introduction to banquets. I don't know if you have any questions.
How hard have your hangovers been after these type of events?
Yeah, well, it's also something that changes with age. When I was just starting working, I guess I was in my late 20s. Sometimes I would be having baijiu for lunch and dinner, and next morning no problem. So nowadays, if I'm really drunk on baijiu, the next day, the whole day, I'm basically useless. But one thing that people do is that they will go to the bathroom, they make themselves sick, and then they come back and they keep drinking.
Okay.
And then when they leave, they go and make themselves sick again, and then all the baijiu is gone, and then that's how they deal with it.
And the next day at the office, is it? Can everybody tell that you're, or like you've been at the banquet, or
Because normally everybody's together, so but it's quite funny because some people seem to have a real tolerance to baijiu, and I remember we had one sales guy, and he was really drunk, and I mean he passed out on the ground, and we had to carry him to the taxi, and then he couldn't remember which hotel he was staying, so we're trying to work out where he was staying, and he was just completely gone. And then the next morning we're at an exhibition, and the next morning he was there, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, 8 o'clock, no problems. So some people, they process the alcohol differently.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so basically everybody knows that because basically your whole team is there, so it's like a team effort.
But one thing I've noticed in general, especially among the Chinese, that day two seems to be not an issue for them.
What do you mean?
In terms of hangover, it's really funny. But Chinese people either they don't say, or it really doesn't affect them. But normally, after a hard night at Baijiu, the next day they're fine, fighting fit.
Really?
It could be that they finish the Baijiu at 8 o'clock, and then they just drink a lot of water or whatever, and get the alcohol out of their system. They have enough time from 8 at night until 8 in the morning. So maybe that's how it is. But in general, yeah, it seems that Chinese people are pretty good at recovering from alcohol. Maybe not drinking alcohol. You often see people is getting drunk quite quickly and things like that. But the next morning, yeah, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
What I remember when I was very young, just experimenting with the alcohol, I had a really low tolerance because I wasn't used to it. So I would like drink a six pack and I would be like super happy and wasted very soon. But it's still a low amount of alcohol. So when I was 16, my body could, or 18 or whatever, my body could really effectively wash it out of the system.
Yes, yeah, so yeah. As you get older, it becomes more difficult.
Yeah, so maybe that's the thing, that they just get drunk really fast from small amount of alcohol, and then they just like wash it out.
And the other thing is, you notice with Chinese is quite a lot of Chinese have some type of allergy to alcohol, and as soon as they drink it, their face becomes red.
Really?
Either bright red or white. And sometimes
okay?
Yeah, and they're fine, but they have they're just unable to process the alcohol. So sometimes you see people and they look really red in the face, and they've just had a little bit of alcohol, but they just can't handle it. And then you get the other thing is, in China there is definitely a relationship between the senior leaders, senior officials in companies or government, and the people who can drink. And normally the people who are quite senior in a company, they can drink a lot.
It's an acquired tolerance.
I think that if you can't survive that type of lifestyle, then you have to quit the company.
Yeah, yeah.
Then it's like in the West, if people want to spend more time with their families, then maybe they won't spend so much time on sort of trying to go higher in the corporate ladder. And in China, if you can't drink well, then it's often not an option for you to climb up the corporate ladder.
Interesting. Anything else?
I think Banquets is just about it. So drink up, drink a lot of water, watch out for those fish bones.
Don't die either from alcohol poisoning or the fish bones.
Yeah, I think the alcohol poisoning is probably less unless it's fake alcohol, and then anything can happen.
Or that puffy fish.
Yeah, I had heard a story that I assume is true. In the early 90s or late 80s, there was an American businessman who had gone to a Baijiu dinner in the northeast of China. And northeast of China, they're drinking very heavily. And he was quite drunk, and he went back to his hotel room, and he was smoking in bed, and he fell asleep with the cigarette still lit, and he burnt the hotel down.
And died, I guess.
He didn't die, but apparently someone else died. That's what I heard. That's what it was.
Oh, really?
A scandal.
Oh, well, that's maybe possibly even worse.
Yeah, so if you're with the Baijiu, don't smoke in bed.
Okay, I don't smoke in general, so I'm good with that.
Yeah, but some people, when they drink Baijiu, they do smoke. So
cool. I think I now have a pretty long list of items to do and not to do, to process.
So you just remember when you're in one of these banquets that you should have a feeling about the ranking of the person that is with you, or the people that are with you, and especially the guys that are more senior with you. You have to really make an effort, to go up and drink with them. Your glass has to be lower, and just to show respect to the people. In Chinese society, your place is very, very important. Mm-hmm. So if you are of a certain rank, of a senior rank, then you also have to show people that you are of that rank. So if you came up and you're the boss of a company and you were going to drink with the driver and you put your glass underneath the driver's, everybody would think that that's very strange.
Yeah.
They would think that you're an idiot. Who drinks like that? Right. So you have to show your respect, either that you're worthy of that respect, and that people need to also give you that respect, but also for the senior people, and then they will think that you're someone that understands their importance, understands the culture. And then the next step is, when you have that relationship, then you can start to use that relationship to ask for favors, to ask for information, to help your business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess after a few of these banquets, I think it becomes more like automatic.
Yes,
you pick up all the cues and habits.
Exactly, and basically with the Chinese banquets, you get in early, you get out fast. So it's 6 o'clock start, 8 o'clock you're done. But of course, as I said before, if there's karaoke after that, then no one knows.
Yeah. That's the episode for a late night series.
Yes, exactly. Adult audience only.